for you all today. All right, hello everyone. I'm so excited to welcome you to today's virtual USA Gap Year Fair. We are thrilled to be hosting you this afternoon. Just a quick note before we get started, I want to remind you that while this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with registered participants, the provider info sessions following the webinar are not recorded. So definitely be sure to check those out as you don't want to miss any important content. Thank you, Tracy. All right, well, thank you all again for joining us live and coming prepared with questions. I'm super excited for what we have in store for you today. And I wanted to just take a moment to quickly introduce myself so you know who's speaking at you. My name is Tyler Janae, and I'm the Outreach and Events Coordinator for USA Gap Year Fairs and Go Overseas. And I really fell in love with travel and adventure after studying abroad in Costa Rica, which you can see down there at the bottom. That was my first time ziplining. It was really exciting. And then after that, I earned my Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate in Cape Town, South Africa, which is the picture here with the penguins. And then I also taught English and American culture with high school students in Spain. So needless to say, international education and meaningful travel experiences are something I'm really passionate about. And I'm thrilled more than anything to be here today to help you achieve the gap year adventure of your dreams. Like I said, my fantastic colleague Tracy is joining us as well and will be helping out behind the scenes, dropping links. Throughout the course of this webinar, we will start off the event with our Gap Year one-on-one given by our Gap Year counselor extraordinaire, Jason from J2 Guides. But before we do, I'll share a few important resources and share a little bit more about Go Overseas. All right, so this event is hosted by Go Overseas, which you can think of as Yelp, but for meaningful travel experiences. So we're gonna go ahead and drop that link in the chat for you. On gooverseas.com, you can browse programs, read verified alumni reviews, and explore other resources such as articles, guides, and even scholarships. If you're inspired to take the leap and start planning your gap year, this is a great place to do your research and find your best fit program. Thanks. Before we really dive into the afternoon's core programming, this is just a quick overview of what to expect today. Throughout the course of this webinar, we will start off the event with a Gap Year one-on-one given by our Gap Year counselor extraordinaire, Jason Sarouhan, and from J2 Guides. But before we do, I'll share a few important resources and share a little bit more. And then you'll get an opportunity to interact with our program providers during the actual fair. And Jason and I will be in the Expert Help Center throughout in case you have any questions or you want to continue to have this conversation. So speaking of the Help Center, something I want to highlight, which will be your best friend throughout the entire virtual fair, is the Attendee Hub, which we're dropping a link to in the chat right now. So please bookmark this page because this is going to be your home base for the entire virtual fair experience. You'll use the Zoom links inside the hub to access provider info sessions and Q&As. If you ever lose this link, you can also find it in the Zoom reminder emails for this event. Now, before I introduce our amazing speaker for the evening, I wanted to take a quick moment to share a few more links with you all that you can check out during this event or even afterwards. So first up is the USA Gap Year Fair's landing page, which we're dropping a link to in the chat now. This is where you can find scholarships and read those reviews that we mentioned before. Second, this is definitely pay attention here. This is a fun one. Here at USA Gap Year Fairs, we're always looking to improve our content and make gap year information as accessible as possible. So with that being the case, we'd love to hear about your experience today. And if you complete this quick survey within 24 hours, you will be put into a chance to win $250. It's really that simple. And that money can also help with your gap year experience. And then last but not least is my favorite, our GapMatcher tool. I'm really excited about this one. And I personally think this is the coolest and the greatest resource for today. So the GapMatcher is the official USA Gap Year Fair search tool. And it was designed to generate a list of personalized gap year program suggestions based on you. So if you still aren't quite sure which programs you're checking out during the fair, I'd invite you to actually take this GapMatcher to get your own customized list of programs to visit today. Thank you, Tracy. I really do have some exciting news to announce here at Go Overseas and USA Gap Year Fairs. We're excited to announce that we are giving away $5,000 in gap year funding. This is through our 2022 Gap Year Scholarship. It takes less than 2 minutes to start your application. And so I'm going to encourage all of you who meet the eligibility criteria to go ahead and start your application now. You're only about 3 steps away from winning $5,000 to help you make this a reality, help you make your gap time a reality. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over the mic to who you all have been so patiently waiting for, our wonderful gap year counselor, Jason from J2 Guides. Jason is an accredited gap year consultant, co-chair of the Gap Year Association Standards and Accreditation Committee, and he's also a member of its board of advisors. He's been a keynote speaker with us at the USA Gap Year Fair since 2011, so he definitely knows what he's talking about. Before he dives in, I just want to quickly remind everyone of that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit any questions as you think of them, and we'll answer them at the end of the event. Without further ado, Jason, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Tyler, and thank you, Tracy. And thanks everybody for being here this afternoon and evening. Again, I'm Jason Sarouhan. I'm an accredited gap year consultant and one of the co-founders of J2 Guides. And tonight, I'm really excited to talk to you a bit about planning a gap year, but ultimately I want to start with this bigger idea of what is gap time and trying to equip you with all the information you need so that when you dive into this fair later on in say 25 minutes, you're really going to have the information to ask great questions and make some good connections with programs. Tracy, if we can go to the next slide. So to start off, let's start with just a foundational definition. At J2 Guides, we often talk about the phrase gap time. And though gap year is very commonly known, it really is a British term, and it's very specifically based in the UK. When we're looking at American students, we have students who are taking all kinds of gap time. And so if we break it down to a fundamental definition, really this is just any significant period of intentional time that you're taking to get out into the world and step out of what is comfortable and known for you to learn in a hands-on way and really deepen your knowledge base so that you can then apply it to what's coming next. Please note that I didn't say how long you had to go for. We have some students who will take gap time for just this coming summer between high school graduation and whatever they go on to next. Other students will be offered a January admission to school, and so they'll maybe have 6 months after high school graduation for them to be able to take gap time. Some students will also think about taking up to an entire year of gap year between, say, high school graduation and when they start college or when they start community college or they head off to a trade school. And then finally, there are students who take open-ended time. So whatever is right for you, and that's going to be one of the big themes of tonight's presentation, is going to be the right amount of gap time. Also note that I didn't say where you had to go in this definition. Lots of people feel like, such as Tyler or my gap time where I took time in Tanzania, you have to go abroad. You have to be out somewhere really different than where you live now. And there's a lot of benefits to doing that. And if that's right for you, that's incredible. More power to you. I hope you can travel. It's incredible to be out in the world. And we have amazing gap year programming right here in the United States. You don't have to leave the US to have a compelling experience. In fact, you don't have to leave your home state. And I'll make the argument that you don't even actually have to leave your hometown for your gap year to be meaningful and productive. And we're going to dive into ways that you could do that even in your own gap time as we get further into the presentation. Finally, the last thing I just want to share is there's often this misconception that gap year is just this destination that leads off to the horizon, and it doesn't actually have its own path that it's directing you towards. And what I'd argue is that gap year is actually really the journey. You're already choosing the destination. And maybe for you, that is college. Maybe for you, that is a trade school. Maybe that's the military. Who knows? You're the one who knows where you are headed. Gap year is just a different pathway and journey to get there. And the benefit of taking this time is that it creates spaciousness and it allows you to really investigate the things that you're interested in, as well as apply all of the knowledge that you've already learned to real world experiences. And when you've then had a chance to build up even more experience by being out there and trying things in a hands-on way, you will be able to bring that directly back into your further studies or your career path later on. So this becomes a holistic cycle of education. Again, it's not a destination unto itself. It's really the journey to get you there. Next slide, please. So when my wife Jane and I talk about this idea of gap year, and when we start talking with students about whether or not it's the right opportunity for them, the first thing that we start with is the question of why. Why are you thinking about doing this? And frankly, for every senior who's out there or junior who's watching this, we want you to be asking the same question about college. We're not questioning the validity of college. We're questioning why you want to go to college and why you want to go to college now. And we want you to ask the same question about gap year. What's going on for you in your life right now that this might be the right opportunity? Up here on the screen, you'll see several of the most commonly cited reasons why people in the last 3 years have taken gap time. And of course, COVID-19 has been a big one, but you'll notice that that's not the main reasons that are cited up here. Lots of students want to take gap time because it helps them increase their confidence, or it helps them build a sense of maturity. Other students are really interested in investigating a major that they might attend in college, or to think about what their career path might be before they actually go into a longer course of study. Of course, many of you students are probably feeling really burnt out. I don't know how many of you caught the Time article that came out yesterday, but we've seen what's happened with the college acceptance rate. We're seeing how many students are getting put onto wait lists, and we're seeing students who went and applied to their safety schools and didn't get in, but somehow got into one of their reach schools. It's a crazy world. And if you're feeling burnt out by that, particularly in the last 2 years, you're not alone. So whatever your reasons are, please start with the why. Really confront that, really get real with it, because those are going to help you figure out what your goals will be ultimately later on. And the other great thing about identifying your why is that when you start talking with your friends and your family, giving you having a good sense of what your why is going to be the answer to the question of, well, what are you doing next? And if your answer is, well, I'm taking a gap year, the obvious next question is, well, why would you do that? And you're going to have the answer. Well, Grandma, I'm actually really interested in pursuing a career in medicine, but I think I want to do that. I just don't have any exposure. So it makes sense to me that I'm going to go and study medicine before I get into college. I'm going to actually do some hands-on work. I'm going to train to be an EMT. Or, you know what, I'm feeling totally burnt out and my mental health has really been suffering. I really need a little spaciousness and I need a break. There's empowerment in that. There's agency in being able to have the answer to that question of why. Next slide, please. So for any of you Ted Lasso fans out there, this one is for you. One of my heroes in the world is a trail runner named Zoe Rom. I do a lot of trail running, and she recently put out a permission slip to all of the rest of us to dream big and to chase big dreams. And one of the things that I've realized about being an adult in the world, and I think a lot of adults on this call can probably agree with me, is that we don't give ourselves a lot of permission slips. We have lots of life practicalities that we have to deal with. Many of our decisions have to be highly pragmatic. But for you all, as young adults who are stepping out of your young adult life, living at home with your family, and moving into the first chapters of your adult life, you do have the opportunity to dream. And I want to write you this hall pass. I want to write you the hall pass, the permission slip to dream big right now about thinking about a gap year. And what does that mean? Next slide, please. Well, when we're looking at gap year and gap year planning, we want to start with a full permission brainstorm. And this means I want you to grab a pen and a paper, and I want you to go sit somewhere beautiful and quiet, away from your family, away from outside influences. Don't do this on a screen, and just start handwriting out the answer to the question of, if you could take a gap year, what would you do? Or what would you want to learn? Or who would you want to be around? Or where would you want to go? And we want the thoughts to flow. We are all so good at limiting ourselves in our mind before we even start something. Oh, I can never do that because I have no experience with it. Or I can never do that because I don't feel I'm smart enough, or I'm not athletic enough, or I'm not cool enough, or whatever it is. We're so good at limiting ourselves. Those limitations have no place in this brainstorm. If you're interested in pursuing your Spanish, but you only have 1 or 2 years, put it down. If you're excited about doing an internship in something you don't know anything about, put it down. If you want to travel to that incredible place, but you have no idea how you're going to get there, just put it down. If you don't plant the seeds, there's no chance that any of these dreams can grow. So don't shut it off before it's even had a chance to have a moment in the sun. Later on, as we get into the practicalities of gap year planning, as you start talking about budget with your family, sure, there's going to be some limitations. But parents and guardians, I want to say that there's a real benefit to letting your child do this as well. If we let them dream, if we let them have agency in this, I promise you, having done this with thousands of students now in our terms of working with students as gap year consultants, that almost to a one, students' goals align with the goals that you have for them. Sure, they might write down on this list surfing, but I can tell you that very few students want to spend their entire gap year surfing. And I know very few families are probably going to support an entire gap year surfing. But wouldn't it be amazing if your son or daughter ended up going off to Spain and doing a semester abroad there, really deepening their Spanish, living with a homestay family, maybe taking some classes, maybe volunteering. And at the end, they had a chance to go surfing on the coast of Spain, or having a chance to go do that in Brazil or in South Africa. I imagine that most families here could get behind that. Surfing's not going to be the priority in the gap year. What it's going to be is going to be something that augments that time. So again, start with the why, move on to an amazing brainstorm. And then our next step is to really start beginning to think about structure. So when we start looking at parameters for your gap year, everybody's idea of their gap time and what's going to support them is going to be really different. But some of the things that we've seen over the years is that a few key ingredients can make any gap year experience really resonate and stand out as being meaningful. We want these to be reflective activities. We want them to be highly productive for you, and we want you to be able to access the learning in real time. So what are those ingredients? The first one right out the gate is intention. Anything that you choose to do, you want to understand why you're doing it. Coming back again to that, what is your why? So whatever you choose to do, get clear on why you're doing it and what you're hoping to get out of it. Because without setting those goals in advance, it's really difficult to achieve them. The second thing to build in is structure. Even if you're traveling independently, or even if you're working, having something that's going to wake you up every day with purpose, with a sense of, I know where I'm going today and what it is that I'm doing, is going to add a tremendous amount of texture to that day. It's always going to help bring you in alignment with lots of other people who are interested in the same thing. So gap year experiences that build in structure tend to be ones that students are able to engage in really readily. Also, what makes gap year different than just traveling is the idea of mentorship. So we want to align ourselves with adults that care about you, right? We want adults to be invested in you. We want people with more knowledge about the particular area or the activity that you're doing to spend time with you and really mentor you in, to bring you in to that field, that interest, that area of activity, so that you can grow and so that they can share with you the depth of their knowledge. That level of mentorship takes an after school job from just being something that provides you with a little bit of pocket money to something that can actually really change your life. And as a young adult, build values and really help set you in alignment with where you want to go in the future. And then finally, put yourself in space with your peers. Gap year is all about stepping out of what is comfortable for you. You're stepping out of your comfort zone into that learning space. And sometimes that learning space is not that graceful. And sometimes it's kind of awkward. And sometimes it's a little embarrassing. And I can tell you that adversity really loves company. It is so much easier to sit down with your homestay family and have another student next to you and be served something that you've never eaten before and look over your friend like, are we really doing this? We're really doing this. Like, we're eating chicken feet right now. We're doing this, and laugh about that later on, about how courageous both of you were and how amazing that experience was, as opposed to facing that alone. So put yourself in alignment with community. And if you build in these 4 ingredients to any of your experiences, I can tell you that the meaningful productivity and the meaningful levels of reflection are going to be right there and readily accessible to you. Next slide, please. Beyond this, we have to start really dialing down to what your filters are for your gap time. What are you most interested in? Where does your budget lie? Where are the places that you want to go? All of these things are highly individualized. What you want to do is going to be different than what your best friend wants to do. What you need to be happy and healthy is going to be different than that other group mate who's a part of your gap year program. It's really critical that you start dialing in on a few main issues. And a few of them are up here now. We talked a little bit about budget, but you and your family need to have a serious conversation. What is the budget? Or what's your expectation of me in terms of how I'm going to participate? Can I look at experiences that we have to pay for? Or do I have to basically earn my keep in all of them, or actually get paid while I'm on my gap year experiences? Can I think about going internationally? And if so, where would I go? Or where are you comfortable with me going? Or should we be looking at mostly domestic options? How long do I want to go for? Is this a 1-week cooking course in England? Are we talking about like a 3-month experience doing cross-cultural immersion in Thailand? what is the depth and range of the experience you want to have? It's very common for gap year students to build in 3 or 4 or 5 different opportunities over the course of one, say 9 to 12 month gap year. So you might actually have a diversity of opportunities from 1 week all the way up to multiple months. You have to really think about that as you're moving through. Finally, setting goals around whether this is going to be a soft skill based focus. Soft skills are building your capacity to make presentations in front of other people, or learning how to work in teams, or learning about collaboration and problem solving. Whereas hard skills might be, I really want to learn how to roll a sea kayak, or I'm really excited to learn how to do data coding, or I'm excited to learn a new language. All of those are hard skills you can take away from you. Finally, are you comfortable in urban settings? Do you prefer rural settings? Are you looking to expand your comfort in some of those areas? If you'd asked me at 18 if I wanted to go live in a big city like Rome or Shanghai, I would have been like, whoa, absolutely not. I grew up in a much more rural area. I feel way more comfortable there. But if you ask me now where I'd want to go on gap time, I'd probably still want to push the limits and try and go to a city like that, because I know I would grow a lot from that experience, even if I don't necessarily want to live there now. And then finally, which of your experiences are going to be ones that you choose to do in a group, and which ones will you do more independently, where you're off on your own and actually trying to meet and build your own community? If you start thinking about these kinds of filters and parameters right now, you're going to really be able to nail and dial in on what are the right programs and organizations for me to look at. Finally, and this is a really important aspect of gap year planning, is building in what we often like to call the progression. Like learning any new skill set, like learning to read, like learning to swim, like learning to ski, we don't take folks who are new to those environments and drop them in the proverbial deep end of the pool. And the reason we don't do that is because it's not a recipe for being successful. If I were trying to teach you how to ski, I would not bring you up to the top of the black diamond, let alone the double black diamond slope, and just ski down and say, see at the bottom, just make sure you keep your pizza pie turn. That's not a recipe for you to learn or succeed. What we actually want to do, and this is all about your gap year too, because you're going to be learning so many new skills, is we want to start by immersing ourselves in that new environment with a lot of support. We want to have flotation. We want to have people overseeing us. We want to have people teaching us the skills so we can be competent and confident within that environment. We also want space to practice those skills. So we want to be able to have the opportunity to try things, make mistakes, recover from those, and learn from them. And finally, soon enough, after we've gotten our feet under us and we've been really learning how to do this thing, we can start moving into kind of that deeper end of the pool, swimming on our own, really feeling like we've got confidence and ownership over the experience. If you think about that gap year as a progression, we really encourage you to have that first experience that you choose to be something that's got a high level of support built in. Almost all of the experiences you're going to meet tonight are facilitated group-based gap year programs. They all specialize in this. They want to immerse you in these new environments and cultures and languages and skills, and they're going to give you a high level of mentorship so that you will soon enough be flying on your own. Ideally, you're going to build right off of that, and your second experience, perhaps in the winter, and or your third experience in the spring, are going to subsequently utilize those skills that you've learned and that empowered feeling that you have to build on this chance of more and more independence. Ideally, when you're done with your gap time, we want to see you feeling independent and ready to go off to that next thing, really ready to live out on your own in the world. So if you follow that progression, you're going to really build out a gap year for yourself that's ultimately going to lead to just high levels of happiness and ultimately high levels of success throughout that whole time. So we talked a little bit about this idea of planning a gap year, and I've talked about some of the key ingredients. The first thing is establishing your why and figuring out what you want. The second aspect of this is figuring out your parameters and what it is that you need. And then finally, you're going to want to try and put it all together. Tonight, why don't you focus on that first part? Why don't you start focusing on some of the things that you're really excited about? Because that's going to lead you to some of those programs that are going to be really interesting for you to talk to. Later on, as you go home and talk with your family, then you can start talking about those things that you need. And then ultimately, as you start planning out your gap year, you're going to lay it out in the progression that makes the most sense to you. So before our last slide, the question I want to just share out loud to you is, why wouldn't you take a gap year right now, right? Why not choose to take this time? And I think it's a really important question for you to answer, because right now you're in this special spot in your life, and it's really different in so many other chapters that you're going to have. You're at this place where you're graduating from high school. You're thinking about taking this next big step into your adult life. A chapter is closing, and that chapter is closing. But unlike so many other chapters in your adult life, the next one doesn't actually have to open quite yet. Almost every college in this country will offer you the chance to defer from school for up to a year so that you can go take gap time. They want you to do this. They really encourage it. And the reason they encourage it is because gap year students' GPAs tend to be much higher than students who are going right from high school and into college across all 4 years. Students who take gap time tend to graduate in college from 4 years in greater numbers than their peers. The average graduation rate from a 4-year school right now is between 6 and 6.5 years. It's not a number that a lot of colleges want to talk about. Colleges also see that gap year students tend to transfer less often. They tend to get involved in community more, and they tend to be much happier alumni. So there's a lot of motivation for colleges to encourage you to take gap time. So I'm just going to encourage you to think about this. What could you gain out of a gap year, and why should you take a gap year? Next slide, please. I think the reason you should take one is because you can. Thank you so much. I'm going to be in the breakout room, which is kind of the gap year specialist room where you can ask an expert. If you have any questions about gap year data, budget, you want to talk more about the progression, you want to talk about deferrals, please stop by and let me know.
Awesome. All right, Jason, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get into our Q&A portion of today's fair. So if you have any questions, this is your opportunity to go ahead and put those in the chat. Jason, do you want to add anything about that last slide? I think it's amazing. No?
I think it's the reason to take a gap year, because you can.
Awesome, because you can. Look at all of those amazing photos. All right, so this is your opportunity to leave any questions. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And so now is the opportunity to ask those questions. So I have a question for you, Jason, here. Someone wants to know, what if I want to plan my own gap year, but I want it to be budget friendly? Is that an option, Jason?
It is an option, and I'm so glad that person asked that question. There are lots of what we call work exchange or room and board options that are out there and available for anyone who's graduated from high school, and generally an 18-year-old could pursue. So some examples of that would be going and working on an organic farm in New Zealand, or going to work at a yoga and meditation center in California, or going to work on a vineyard in Italy, or the opportunity to work at a camp year round, not just in the summer, working with kids in outdoor education, working as a trail conservation leader and helping to build trails and maintain state and national parks. All of these kinds of opportunities are cost neutral, meaning it's not going to cost you anything to participate in them. And some of them actually will ultimately provide you with some kind of a salary or a small stipend. So for your labor, you essentially get room and board. So you're housed and fed so that you can also participate and contribute to a project like this. The one piece I want to share about that is that while there are so many amazing listserv-based websites out there of families that need support, watching their kids, or all of these great outdoor centers, it's important that you do your due diligence, get reviews, make sure you speak with references. Not every opportunity is built like the rest. It's really important, again, to build in those ingredients of intention, structure, mentorship, and peers, and making sure that's built in right away from that. Otherwise, you might find yourself in a scenario that doesn't look quite like it was advertised.
Thank you, Jason. We have another question. They're wondering would any colleges ever offer money or a scholarship to help pay for the cost of a gap year if they've already committed to a school and decide to defer?
That's a great question. Actually, a few universities have their own gap year based scholarships. So one that comes to mind is UNC Chapel Hill has for many, many years supported students to take gap time. It's usually not the university's prerogative to do that. You'll notice that there are a number of universities that have their own gap year experiences. Two that are really common is the Princeton Bridge year, and Tufts has 1+4 year. And those are actually literally their own gap year experiences that they have created for students that can apply. And they also help to fund students on those. But most colleges in the country are not offering scholarships. That said, the USA Gap Year Fairs is offering a scholarship for you to do this. The Gap Year Association has lots of other scholarships that are built for students who are looking to take this time as well.
Thanks. We have another question related to our scholarship. What if I'm an international student? Would it still be possible to get scholarships or support? So for our Go Overseas $5,000 scholarship, as long as you are residing in the US, you will still be able to apply for that scholarship. We also have a lot of other scholarships available on our website. So if you want to go ahead and take a look at the link in the chat that has our landing page, you can definitely explore a lot of other scholarship opportunities as well. But if you are, as long as you are residing in the US, you can totally take advantage of this scholarship. Okay, here's one for you, Jason. From your experience, are college acceptance rates any different for students applying after taking a gap year compared to freshman applicants who have not taken a gap year?
Yeah, that's difficult to say, and particularly with the changing landscape of the last 3 years in multiple realms, right? Not only have we had the pandemic, which created this huge infusion of gap year students when colleges were really uncertain how they could welcome students back, but then many colleges also went test optional, and so they have now been flooded with more applications than are even possible to review. So their application rates are so high, and their admission rates are now so low. One of the things that we can say, though, with a real sense of definitiveness, is that if a student is choosing to apply for college during their gap time or to reapply to college during their gap time, you've got some real benefits going for you. One of those is that your fall and spring grades from senior year can be included within your academic transcripts. So if you're showing positive academic trajectory and your grades continue to be high or they continue to go up throughout senior year, that's going to tell the colleges something that they actually didn't get a chance to really see when you applied in the fall of your senior year, in the late fall, right? So that's really interesting. Students who are applying during their gap time also will have had the summer to have done something that was potentially impressive, whether that was working or caring for a sick relative or getting an internship in something they're interested in. And then, of course, if you're applying during the fall of your gap year for the following fall, something that's interesting is that you will have had this amazing gap year experience for you to write about and ultimately have be a part of kind of your overall presentation. So there's no doubt that most seniors are actually more impressive candidates for college because they've just had more time to be more impressive, right? So you've had almost 9 more months of time to be able to show yourself and really reveal all these amazing aspects of who you are, beyond the fact that colleges see that gap year students are coming in onto campus much more maturely. So it is a draw for lots of schools. Colorado College is an amazing example of a school that really thrives for gap, is a thriving place for gap year students, but they really love gap year students who are applying both before their gap time and after.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Jason. All right. So for the sake of time, we have to go ahead and wrap up the questions, but Jason and I will also be in the expert help room. So you can go ahead and click on the Airtable link. I saw a couple of people who were asking about some of the links who might have joined a little bit later. Who might have joined a little bit later. So we're going to go ahead and put those links in the chat as well. Just as a quick reminder, we do have this scholarship. Tracy, if you would like to share that screen one more time. This scholarship is mainly for US residents. So making sure that we are aware of that. So please make sure you take advantage of this opportunity. Even if you are on the fence about taking a gap year and you're not 100% sure, still apply for this scholarship if 2022 or 2022 is what you're interested in pursuing a gap time during. So just please take advantage of this. This is an amazing opportunity, and we hope you all had an amazing time with us, and we will see you in the expert help room. Enjoy the fair. All right, there is the attendee hub link there. If you would like to drop that in the chat one more time for them. And then we are good to go. All right, everyone, enjoy and have a great fair. Bye-bye.
Everyone.